Welcome to O'Hara. It's time to explore the depths of your mind, your sanity, and your fear. I hope you're sitting comfortably. Enjoy. This is Tombs. I received a letter from my friend Azumi, who moved away last year. She said a new town was strange and I should come visit her. I told my brother Tsuyoshi, and he asked if she asked him to visit as well. I replied, well, mainly me, but maybe we can both go for the weekend. Let me help you out. I just got a new car and I'll give you a ride. I was hesitant at first because he only just got his license, so I told him not to worry about it, but he insisted. We set off on the long journey. Everything was fine. The weather, the car, not a single problem in sight. We were keeping good time and we were going to arrive around sunset. He seemed just as excited to see Azumi as I did. He tried to play it cool, saying he was just worried about his baby sister, that he was just coming along to keep me safe. I don't know about that. He seemed pretty psyched when I told him we could go. We'd been on the road 6 hours now. I said that maybe we should take another break, but he replied that we were almost there, grinning the whole time like an idiot. What's strange about the town anyway? Exactly how is it strange? He said. What's up with it? Before I could reply, a young girl stumbled out into the road, looking dazed. Watch out! I cried. We both sat there in silence for what felt like an eternity, not looking at each other, only forward, fearing the worst. We mustered the courage to get out of the car and check. We both stepped out and slowly peered over the end of the bonnet. Just as we both feared. There she was, limp, lifeless, wearing a stripy shirt and shorts covered in blood. My brother rushed to her side. She's in bad shape. We're gonna get her into the car. We have to get to a hospital. We hauled the mangled body into the car, a trail of blood trickling from her to the ground. We lay her down in the back seat. Her face was so swollen and bashed, she was almost unrecognizable. My brother hit the gas and we sped off. I reached for her wrist and her neck, her chest. I couldn't find a single ounce of life, a pulse, anything to indicate that she might still be alive and breathing. I said this to Tsuyoshi and he stopped the car. Why did you stop? We need to get her to a hospital right now. She's dead, right? He said, staring into the rear view at the poor soul we had just taken. We decided it best to keep it hidden for now. We checked no cars were coming and no one could see us, and got out again, and dragged the corpse into the trunk of the car, closing the lid, wiping any signs of blood, death, any indication there might be a dead body hiding in the back of the car. The rest of the journey to Azumi was agony. Piercing silence was only broken by the occasional bump in the road, or passing car. Another hour, and we finally reached the small village. This was where Azumi lived. My brother said we're going to be late getting to our house, as we would have to drive through the town to find another good spot to park. I was gazing out the window at the houses, when the car came to a halt again. I looked ahead to see why we had stopped. A strange, dark-coloured pillar was in the middle of the road. It looked like a signpost, minus any markings or information. But why would you have a sign directly at the centre of the road? Tsuyoshi pulled the car around, and we continued on. I got a closer look as we went by. It was bumpy, rigid, but uniform enough to hold its tall, rectangular shape. It almost looked like a tombstone. which is even far more preposterous than a signpost. It wasn't long before we stopped again. This time, another sequence of similar pillars, hundreds along the road, scattered around without pattern or meaning. There were different sizes, but all in the same tall, stony figure. They didn't look man-made, rather they seemed to be growing out of the ground. "What is all this?" Tsuyoshi said. "I guess I'll have to turn around." He didn't seem nearly as fazed by all this, and was far more interested in moving on than investigating. Not again, I thought. We had struck something behind the car this time. With the same reservation as before, Tsuyoshi exited the car and went round to check. Turns out he had backed into one of these pillars and it had gotten wedged under the rear tyre. It was stuck. A small crowd began to emerge as Tsuyoshi scolded himself and inspected the back of the car. The locals began chiming in. "You're not from around here, are you? Get your jack out the trunk. Yeah, that's it. It's pretty cursed." Thought this was a strange thing to say, knocking over a signpost, but I guess it was a local custom. I got out to watch as Tsuyoshi went round the back and opened the trunk, but remembered the corpse in the back and quickly grabbed the jack and slammed the trunk. They got to work jacking up the car and lifted it above the ground, allowing them to remove the slab from beneath. It took no more than 10 minutes, as the locals were incredibly helpful. They said it was no trouble and left us to be on our way. Tsuyoshi did ask one thing before leaving, though. "What exactly are these things?" One of the locals replied, "Tombstones, of course. Yes, it was first just folks who died in the road, but lately other stones have been popping up, so the roads are basically closed." "Why did the stones appear in the middle of the road?" I asked. "Because folks died on the road." Just then, 2 hands appeared in front of my eyes. It made me jump at first, but I realised it was Azumi. "You made it. It was getting late, so I was worried you might have gotten lost. You haven't changed a bit," I replied. "Neither have you." We had a brief catch-up, found a suitable place to leave the car, and Azumi led us to her house. It was a medium-sized building, nothing special, but it seemed comfortable and safe. We went inside and were greeted by Azumi's mother and sat down in the living room. "I bet you were just as surprised as we were when we saw the tombs on the road. I'm used to it now, though. In fact, check this out." She pulled back 2 doors in the adjacent room, and just like on the road, a tall tombstone was there in the middle of the room. I asked why it was there, and she replied, "This is where they died, of course. The house is a rental. I guess this belongs to whoever lived here before in this town. They place a tombstone wherever the person died. I was shocked when we first got here, but it's just sort of the way it is." Azumi's mother entered the room with 3 drinks and laid them down on the table. "You two are staying for a few days, right?" We both nodded. "Oh goodness, you don't look well," she said, directing her gaze at Tsuyoshi. I noticed he was sweating slightly. Nerves from meeting Azumi, or perhaps the previous incidents. "Oh, it's a long trip, so we're a little tired, and we hit a tombstone with the car on the way here, so..." "No wonder you're a bit out of it," she said. "Well, why don't you rest a minute and Azumi can show you around?" We finished our drinks and went out once again. It was just before sunset, so there was enough light to see and examine more tombs. They were everywhere. Every street, every corridor, every house, every building seemed to have at least one tombstone nearby. Azumi said, "My brother said they belonged to the ancestors of the people in this town. As he said, each stone was erected over the place the person died. They tried to bring people on the verge of death to a clear spot outside so they can rest in peace, and so there's space for the tomb." I thought it was a rather weird custom, erecting tombs where you died rather than moving your body to a more suitable spot. Your stone goes no matter where you die. They've always been like this. We kept walking and ended up outside a hospital building. A group of doctors were rushing outside with a stretcher and what looked like a corpse on top. "He's going to die. Hurry, move on." They gently sat the poor man down on the ground, in the car park surrounded by other tombstones. "The patient's about to die." Azumi then said, "They can't have them dying in the hospitals, so they tried to bring them outside." It's so heartless, tossing a dying person on the ground like that. Is there really nothing at all they can do? They can't build a tombstone inside the hospital. I was being as inquisitive as ever. Tsuyoshi was being quite quiet. "Tsuyoshi, you've been really quiet this whole time. Is there something bothering you?" Azumi asked. "He's probably just baffled by the town," I replied. "I thought you'd find it interesting. You like all those scary books and all." He replied, "I'm just a little car sick is all, feeling queasy." "You should rest then. Let's go back to the house." I forced myself to be cheerful, but Tsuyoshi was struggling. "The tombstones here are a weird shape and all different sizes," he said. We stopped on the path and in front of us was a dead cat in the middle of the road. "Poor thing got hit by a car, I guess," he said. "It's so sad. Let's bury it somewhere." "Don't!" Azumi cried. "Don't touch it. You can't touch it. If you do, the cat will never find peace. Just leave it so the tombstone can go up." "A tombstone for a cat?" Tsuyoshi said, perplexed at the idea. We got back to the house and had a further discussion about the tombstones. People are pretty compassionate. Building a tombstone for a stray cat. I get why they're different sizes now. The smaller ones are for pets, right? Azumi's mother came into the room. "Is Ayumi not back yet?" she asked. "I don't know. I haven't seen her," Azumi replied. "She's late. Where's she gone to?" "Who's Ayumi?" Tsuyoshi asked. "Azumi's little sister," I replied. "How is she?" I said. "Same tomboy as always. She's been out in the mountains all day again. Probably went pretty far," said Azumi. Ayumi still hadn't returned by nightfall. "Maybe she got lost, or she was kidnapped, or... Did you call the police?" Her dad was already panicking. "Why didn't you report this right away?" My brother turned to them and whispered to me, "What does she look like?" I said, "She's shorter than me and skinny." "What about her hair?" "It's long and she wears braids a lot." It dawned on both of us that perhaps the girl in the trunk may have been Ayumi. We would have to wait till morning to confirm our suspicion, but we thought it best to remain in the house and comfort the family. Ayumi did not return in the night. As it was a small town, if someone went missing, the whole town would know. A search began quickly by the morning. We set out into the mountains. The local fire department, the people in the neighbourhood all joined in. The description: a girl wearing a striped shirt and white shorts, announced the fire marshal to the group. "You don't have to look, Azumi said, trying her best to hide her signs of distress. "No, we're worried too, but I'm sure she's fine. She'll turn up safe and sound, I'm sure." Hundreds of people were calling her name, screaming it across the mountains. I followed suit. We broke away from the bigger pack and overheard one of the locals say, "She's probably already dead, and the tombstone will show up before too long." "Don't say that, and don't tell the family that," the other said in disgust. It had become all too clear at this point that the body in the trunk of the car was that of Ayumi, and me and Tsuyoshi were the only ones who knew the actual truth. "We've been out here for hours, with nothing to show for it. Maybe she's not on the mountains," said one of the locals. "Do you think she might have fallen into the old well? At the shrine?" replied another. "If she did, she's in big trouble," announced the third. "Let's head back and take a look." We moved with the group through the forest and were met with a set of stairs running up the middle of a clearing. The concrete slabs were decrepit and used, but appeared old and well crafted. A small well was positioned to the left of the path, and we all crowded around it. It was dark inside. Anyone see anything? Tsuyoshi said. Of course not. The well is too deep inside, a local replied. He then addressed both me and Tsuyoshi. They've been throwing the dead who failed to find peace in this well ever since way back then, but we still can't see the bottom. They don't know who dug it, but it's incredibly deep. If you fell down there, there is no saving you. Who didn't find peace? I asked. The local replied, failed to find peace means that they never got a proper tomb, and that's the real tragedy. You know, someone died at the hospital yesterday, Tsuyoshi said to me. I wonder if they found peace. We decided to go take a look, and we left the group. What do we do? We killed her, and the body's in the trunk of the car. I too had begun to start panicking. I know, I'm trying to figure out what we should do. Maybe we should just turn ourselves in, I said. We are not saying a word to anyone, he said. We reached the hospital, and we saw a couple talking to a doctor. Thanks to you, he has managed to find peace. That's wonderful news, they said with great excitement. I assumed they were relatives of the old man last night, but to be excited over death seemed incredibly strange. We kept watch over him to make sure no one moved the body so the tomb could form properly. We looked out into the empty space where they left the body. Next to all the other tombs, we could see no body. But then we realised the horror of the town. The tombs are not simply built in a place of where the dead are. The tombs were the dead. The old man's corpse remained, but the midsection was stretching upwards and growing into a tombstone. Now, come to think of it, I noticed that other tombs had subtle markings of human life. Fingers, eyes, hands, veins. Although they were concrete coloured, they seemed almost fleshy. The doctor continued. By tomorrow, it'll no doubt become a magnificent tomb. But the hospital parking lot is going to become filled with tombs before too long. I wonder where our tombs will end up. What's going on here? Tsuyoshi said. He's turning into stone. He reached out his hand to touch it, and the couple screamed, Don't touch! He's not finished yet! Tsuyoshi pulled back and we left. Everyone seemed happy about the tombs and the afterlife process. To us, it was just a nightmare. We began to walk towards Azumi's house. So in this town, dead bodies transform into tombstones. It must be some trick of the area or the climate. We walked past familiar tombs, but with our new knowledge, the traces of people and animals became far clearer to us now. Eyes staring out at us, glassy. Fur from dogs and cats. The tombs really were the bodies of the dead. I said maybe we're trapped in a nightmare. I hope it's a dream too, he said. We got back to the house and we saw Azumi looking through the window of Tsuyoshi's car. We got closer and asked what she was doing. It's nothing, she said. I told her we went to the old shrine by the well, but found no sign of her there. Thank you for looking for her, she said. How'd the search in the mountains go? She said, well, we didn't find anything, but we found some skid marks on the road and there were traces of blood and paint from a car nearby. The police are looking into it. She couldn't have been hit by a car, right? I sure hope not. You two go inside and rest. I still have some things to do. As she walked away, I glanced through the back window and felt like a ghost was entering me. There's blood on the seat. That's what she was looking at, I whispered. Crap, I didn't realise, Tsuyoshi exclaimed. Maybe she knows. What if she figured it out? The panic was really setting in. Just calm down. It's not a lot of blood, so she might not have noticed. But the hood is dented and there's a crack in the headlight. She has to have noticed. We can't keep hiding it. Stop, he said, grabbing my shoulders and trying to calm me down. We again thought it best to keep things hidden further until we could decide what to do. That night at the dinner table was awkward and painful. There was not much talking, only small utterances from the parents. I hope she's alive out there somewhere. If she's dead, if she died out there, being dragged all over the place, she won't get a tomb. You've got to be strong, Tsuyoshi said. I'm sure she's doing fine. If she doesn't grow into a tomb, I don't even know what would happen. Izumi turned to us. You can't touch bodies in this town. Touching a person who just died is like messing with a chrysalis. The result is tragic. I once saw the body of someone who failed to find peace for a tomb in the hospital parking lot. I couldn't look at it. Half of it was stone, but the body would rot if they didn't do something, but burning it would make this horrible smell, so they couldn't cremate it either. In the end, they just tossed it into the old well at the shrine. I don't know when that well was dug, but it's certainly deep. You know how many people failed to find peace and are sleeping at the bottom of it? I guess it is pretty likely she was hit by a car in the mountain. Come to think of it, did you see anything on the way when you drove here? Any suspicious cars? We already assumed she suspected us. I thought maybe it was best to tell them, but my brother stopped me. Nope, we didn't see anything. Sorry we came at such a terrible time. I think we'll head home tonight. Izumi simply cried. We said goodbye to the heartbroken family and left. That night we drove off into the darkness. I said, we can't keep doing this, there's no point in running. We may never wake up from this nightmare. Don't worry, I've got an idea. We just need to make sure there's no evidence. We carefully navigated the mountains, avoiding any tombs, and drove further up into the mountains towards the shrine. We were here this afternoon, right? I know where we can leave the body. He said this and pointed up towards the well. If we throw it in there, they'll never find it. He paused for a moment and said, but something's bugging me. I felt it while I was driving now. The car feels heavy, ridiculously heavy. I had to really hit the gas to accelerate. What do you think is wrong? I asked. He said, well, maybe the body in the trunk is changing somehow. We did move it yesterday. We touched it with our hands. Anyway, we have to hurry before someone comes. We exited the car, making sure no one was looking. Went round the back and opened the trunk. Inside was true horror. Corpse or body would be a generous description, a compliment even, for what lay before us. It had turned into some misshapen, crystalline structure. Long, spindly fingers and glowing eyes, crystals protruding from its mouth. Head, its arms, no longer limbs, but part of a greater whole. Any orifice, any surface that was formerly skin, now spiked, pulsating, oozing. So this is what they were talking about. A body that failed to find peace. Come on, help me. I'm not touching that, I said. I can't do it myself, it's too heavy. He pulled the head out of the trunk, and 2 pigtails fell out with it, still attached to what once was the head. He hauled the rest of it out and dropped it to the ground. It was hard, heavy, fleshy, like the tombs, but more alien. I mustered the courage and we began the climb to the well. It was so heavy. It couldn't have weighed any less than 200 kilos, but dragging it was possible for the 2 of us. It's so gross, I hate it. Just keep going, he said. We set it down to rest for a moment. Then, with one final effort, we dragged it up and over the lip of the well and let it go. We waited patiently for a sound of it hitting the bottom, perhaps water or just the rocks falling from the side. but nothing came. "It's finished now. The nightmare is over," he said, relieved. "It's not even close," I said. "We betrayed my friend because we wanted to run away from our crime, but we can never actually get away from it. The nightmare is just going to continue forever until we die." "You have to understand," he said. "We had to do this. If we hadn't done it, then our lives would be ruined. Come on, let's just go home." We walked slowly down the stairs. I was glad to be leaving this town, but I was very sorry to be leaving Azumi in the way we did. I looked over to Tsuyoshi. He was holding his hand. I said, "What's the matter?" He said, "I must have cut my hand in the body. It's not that deep, and it hurts, but it's fine." Just as he said this, he dropped to his knees and held his ears. "What's that screaming?" He turned back to the well and exclaimed, "It's back! It's coming back! All of them are!" He pointed at the well. "It's pulling itself out! It's saying my name! What I did! It's gonna tell everyone! Help me! It's screaming! It's Umi! Shut up! I'm sorry!" I'd never seen so much fear in his eyes. "What the hell is wrong with you?" I said. He came to his senses. "Huh? Why are you yelling all of a sudden?" I looked up at where I'd been pointing and saw nothing but the well and the empty darkness. He said, It's nothing. Nothing at all." It clearly wasn't nothing. Our suffering continued after that. The guilt of killing and shoving her body into the trunk and throwing her into the well, lying to my friend and her parents. The terror that our crime would somehow come to light. She might have suspected us. It was only a matter of time, in my eyes, before the police came, I thought. Azumi wrote to me. She said that her father's grief was so great that he couldn't even get out of bed anymore. "Forgive me, Azumi, Ayumi. I'm so sorry." "My hand aches," Tsuyoshi said. "Let me take a look." It was over a month since we had left. My mother unwrapped his hand and said, "It's infected, isn't it?" His hand only got worse and worse from there. Soon he, too, couldn't get out of bed. He was in pain for a long while and then he just died. So young, so tragic. We had an open casket at his funeral. Uncle Shimada turned up. He said, "I'd like to see his face." My mother said, "Go right ahead." She opened the doors above the coffin. He said, "He looks just... What is this?" He fell backwards. "When did this happen?" I pushed others aside and peered inside to see Tsuyoshi's corpse had met a similar fate as Ayumi's. The crystal monster inside the casket, staring up at me as if to cry out, "Help." Only I knew the reason, the cause of this, our crime, and now our punishment. I only assumed he was being punished for what he had done, and I thought it wouldn't be too long before the same happened to me. I wanted so badly to repent for our sins. I headed back to the town, the same long journey. Before I went to the police, I just wanted to apologise to my friend and her family, tell them what had happened and what happened to Tsuyoshi, and how sorry we were, and I wish that we could change things and go back. I got to the house and it was quiet, silent, no signs of life at all. I very quickly found proof that the family's grief was far greater than I had ever imagined. Inside the silent house, I found letters addressed to relatives, bottles of sleeping pills lying on the ground, and just behind those, 3 fleshy tombs.